Okay, assessment number 3 over rational expressions. We have to multiply these fractions. And remember, there's a certain way to do it. It's kind of a 3-step process when you're talking about multiplication. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so what I do is I parenthesize where I have minus and plus. Now, I wouldn't parenthesize this because there's no plus or minus within the 7x. See, minus plus, so that's a trinomial. I'll need to factor. That's a binomial. That's a binomial. So the 7x just gets translated over here. Okay, so the expressions I have to factor, I have x squared minus 11x plus 30. That's on the top. Okay, I have 2x minus 10. That's on the bottom. And I have x to the second power minus 6x. That's on the bottom. Okay, so what I have here is a trinomial. So 3 terms. So I look for the GCF. And then I'm going to go to my t-chart. Okay, negative x GCF. So I don't need the negative. I don't need x. And then 1, 11, 30 is 1. So there is no greatest common factor that's worth pulling out. Then I ABC the expression. I take positive 1 times positive 30, and that's positive 30. So I got positive, so it's a sum of 11, which is negative. 1 and 30, that's 31. 30 divided by 2 is 15, that's 17. Divided by 3, it's 10, that's 13. Divided by 4 is a decimal, and if I divide 30 by 5, I get 6, and that's my 11. So 11 being negative means 6 is negative, and I have a positive sum, which means the signs have to be the same. Okay, now your a up there is 1, so it's just x minus 5. A is 1x second, so I can rewrite that x minus 5, x minus 6. Okay, that's on top. All right, now the bottom, GCF DOPS, because it's binomial. Okay, so negative x GCF. So negative, it's not needed. You can't do x because 10 doesn't have it. But the GCF of 10 and 2 is 2. Use that GCF calculator if you need it. So 2's out. And then I have 1x minus 5. Now, that's not a DOPS because you have x isn't even to the second power. And even if it was, 5's not a perfect square. Okay. So we rewrite this expression as 2 times the parentheses 1x minus 5, or x minus 5. And then that's another binomial. So GCF and DOPS. So negative is not needed. You will need x. And then 1 and 6 is 1, but since it's 1x, I have to do it. Okay. And then the x's cancel, and I get 1x minus 6. And that's not a DOPS either, because my x isn't to the power of 2. And again, even if it was, 6 isn't a perfect square. So I rewrite this as 1x, or x, times the parentheses 1x minus 6. Okay. Now I ditch the scratch paper, and then I cross these parentheses out, and I get rid of all of them pretty much. Okay, so on top I have 7x to the first, and on bottom I have a 2 and a 1, so 2 times 1 is 2, and then x to the first. Now I find the GCF out of 7 and 2. Okay. So 2 and 7, it's just 1, okay? So we're going to leave that. You can't divide them by 1 if you want. It's just going to stay 7 over 2. And my x's are both to the first power, so we just eliminate those. And that's my answer, 7 over 2. You can put 3.5 if you want, but it's 7 over 2. Okay, my next one goes a lot quicker because I don't have to factor anything. So step 1's out the door because there's no parentheses I need to make. So I take my 7. If there's another whole number, you multiply, and then I have x second and x to the first, so that makes x to the third, and then I have y to the third. Whoops, not here, sorry. Okay, and then I have 14 as a whole factor. Then for x factors, I just have the one that's to the second. And then for y factors, I have a 1 plus a 5, which is a fact 6. Okay, then I find the GCF of 7 and 14. Remember, you don't divide them, you think of reducing them. And the GCF here is 7, so we divide that by 7 and 14 by 7. That's 1/2. Okay, now I have x third, x second. So we eliminate the smaller power and subtract 2 from the higher power, and that'd be x to the first. And then for y's, I do the same thing. But y to the third would be on bottom because that's where the y to the 6 is at. Okay, that's it. Okay, next problem, solve the equation for x. It's just 2 ratios in the proportion. Okay, so I use the ABCD method. So I know that taking A times B will equal taking C times D. So x minus 1 times 9, and C is 3x, and D is 4. Okay, so here I distribute 9 to each term. That gives you 9x minus 9. And then on the other side, I just take 3x times 4, and that's 12x. Okay, there's only one answer for x, so I can collect my like terms. Subtract 9x. So negative 9 equals 3x, and then divide by 3, and that's negative 3. Okay, next up, I want to make a couple changes to this problem, please. I want you to scribble out the x on that 3. Okay, that's first thing. And instead of just having a 1 there, I want you to put x minus 1. Okay? So make those changes. So this one's 3, so I extend my lines, and I'm going to need to come up with the lowest common denominator for all 3 of my fractions. So the top, I don't need to put any parentheses, so I just drop everything there. Now the bottom, I do need to put parentheses around all of these expressions, and then on bottom we have to see if they factor. So on this paper we got x to the second power minus 1, we have x minus 1, x plus 1. Okay, if you want to put a 1 there, that's fine. So that's 2 terms. So that'd be GCF and DOPS. Okay, GCF, we don't need the negative. We can't do x, and 1 and 1's 1. But we do have the minus, and we do have x to the second. So that's xx. And then 1 is 1 times 1. And that 1 is also 1 times 1. So I rewrite that expression as x plus 1 times x minus 1. Okay. Now the x minus 1, GCF DOPS, negative, no, you wouldn't have x on, and then it's just 1. And you have a minus, but your x isn't to the second power, so we can't factor that at all. So that stays x minus 1. And this is going to be the same thing. I mean, if you look at it, the only GCF I can really get out of that, it wouldn't be a negative, it wouldn't be an x, and then 1. And it can't be a DOPS because we don't even have a minus sign, and our x isn't to the second power. So it's not either one of those, but I'm at least looking at it. Okay, now I do my LCD. So my LCD, I've got x plus 1 and x minus 1. So x plus 1, 1 zeros 1, So I put a x plus 1 factor here and also put it on top. X minus 1, 0, 0, 1. So I go, or no, x minus 1, sorry, 1, 1, 0. And then I go from there, okay? This one's pretty easy to do in your head. It's going to be 2x plus 14. Okay, so I've got 12 plus 2 parentheses x plus 1, and I get 2x plus 14, okay? The other one's 3x minus 3. Now, if you look at this, you'd only have one answer, and these x's are like terms, so get those together. So 14 equals x, or 1x minus 3, and then you add 3 to both sides, and you're at 17. You don't even need to divide by 1, so the answer is 17. Now, in some of those, you have to clear one side and do your factoring. That's because a lot of times you end up with x to the second power and x, which are not like terms. But there you go. Okay, number 6. So far, I've made 30 out of 40 serves in tennis. How many consecutive serves do I need to make to raise that average to 80%? Now, again, it's an average. So there's the average I want, and there's my current average. Okay, so I want to get 80 out of 100. That's what a percent is. But I made 30 out of 40. So I need to, that's 75%. So I add to how many I make, but then that also adds to the attempts automatically. It's just an A, B, C, D problem. I can multiply A times B, that equals C times D. Okay, so A is 80. And B is 40 plus 1x. And then C is 30 plus x, or 1x if you want. And then 100. So then I distribute 80, and that's 3,200 plus 80x. And that's equal to 3,000 plus 100x. Okay, so I get my x's on the same side. That's 20x, so 3,200 equals 3,000 plus 20x, and then I subtract my 3,000, which is 200, and then divide by 20, and 200 divided by 20 is 10. Okay, 10 serves. Okay, next problem. 2 speed skaters travel for the same amount of time. The first speed skater travels a distance of 9 kilometers, while our second one travels a distance of 8 kilometers. The first skater travels 4.38 kilometers per hour faster than the second. How long did the skaters race? Okay, so it's asking for the hours, the time. Now, there's only one answer because they travel for the same amount of time. So I go to my distance, speed, time table. That's a 2 by 8, okay? So I got my fast and my slow. Okay, so I talk about speed first, and then distance, and then time. Okay, now the speed is the per hour, but it's faster. So x plus 4.38 is the fast, and then just x would be the slow. Now the distance, I know both of those right away, 9 and 8. So the farther distance is the faster skater, and then 8 there. Now the time, I don't know anything about that. I know they're equal, okay? And so what I need to do is then write an equivalent expression where it's the distance divided by the speed, okay? Distance on top, 9 and 8, and then x plus 4.38, and then x. Okay, so I set those equal to each other. So 9 over x plus 4.38 equals 8 over x. And the ABCD is what I use to solve cross products. So taking A times B equals C times D. Okay, so A is 9, B is x, C is 8, and D is x plus 4.38. So on this side we'll have 9x. Then on the other side you're going to have 8x. And then 8 times 4.38 is 35.04. Okay, then we subtract 8x from both sides. That's 1x. Then I really don't need to divide by 1, but that also isn't the number of hours they skated for. Okay, you need to insert this solution into your time, one of the times, probably this one, that's a lot shorter, and divide 8 by 35.04. That's 0.23. Again, so it's less than an hour. It's less than half an hour. To find out how many minutes it is, you could times it by 60. It'd be about 13.8 minutes, 14 minutes. Okay, working together, you and a friend can seal your one driveway in 4 hours. Your neighbor can seal the driveway twice as fast as you. How long will it take you to seal the driveway working separately? So again, you got driveways in hours. And hours is defined by X, driveways is Y. So if you're talking driveways per hour, D per hour, I don't know that. And to be honest with you, I really don't need to know it because this is proportional, okay? Because 0 hours, I would have 0 driveways. There'd be no B to this, okay? So I go to my proportions. But we have to add a third proportion over here because they work together. They work separately, and then what it gives me is what they do together. So remember to put the hours on bottom. So it's 1 over 4. Now, working separately, they would still have 1 to do. So I keep the numerators both 1, but I don't know the hours it takes. So X, X, but one of them's twice as fast. So I multiply one of them by 2. So now there's my equation, but it's 3 parts to it, so I need to extend the lines and come up with the lowest common denominator. Okay, now the tops, I just drop all the 1s down. I really don't have any parentheses, so then I'll just not, you don't factor really on this problem. Okay, so my LCD, I don't have any parentheses, but I have outer X, outer 2, and outer 4. Okay, so outer X, 1, 1, 0. So I need an X there. Okay, outer 2, I have 0, 1, 0. So times 2 times 2. And then outer 4, 0, 0, 1. Okay, as long as I bring those first two up by a factor of 4, then they're all the same. Okay, now the bottoms are all done. I don't have to worry about that once they're the same. So I take 1 times 2 times 4 plus 1 times 4, it's 12. And then on the other side, I take, it's going to be 2x, then divide by 2. And 12 divided by 2 is 6. Okay, so 6 is the slower person, but then, or the faster person, takes him less time. The other guy, twice as fast means this guy here is twice as long. Okay, so that would be 12. Okay, then the final problem. An airplane flies 1,000 miles to its destination with the wind. When it flies back, it goes against the wind. In still air, the plane can fly 200 miles per hour. Find the speed of the wind. The trip there and back took 15 hours. Find the wind speed. So there's your miles per hour for the wind speed. So the distance is not miles per hour, it's the miles, okay? Distance. You're looking for miles. And you see 1,000. Now it's 1,000 there. It's 1,000 back. And then total, that's 2,000. I don't really use the 2,000 though. Speed is per hour, okay? Now you got 200 200, but then you add the wind speed one way, and then subtract that the other way. I don't really put anything there. Okay, now we also have 15 hours. That's the trip there and back, so that's total. And that's on top. It's over 1, but we're not going to put a 1 there. Now, there I have to write my distance over speed. Okay, so 1,000, and then 200 plus x, and then I have 1,000 plus, and then 1,000, 200 minus x. Okay, so that's 3, so I extend the lines. Now the tops I would just drop down. No parentheses on top to start with. Now bottom with the plus and the minus, you need to put those expressions in parentheses, but they can't be factored. Okay, so we'll just drop them down. They can't be rewritten in factored form. The GCF's 1 and it's not a DOPS. Okay, and then that stays empty. So now I'm ready to do my LCD. Okay, so I have 200 plus x, and then 200 minus x. Okay, so 200 plus x, 1, 0, 0. So 200 plus x, and then 200 plus x. 200 minus x, 0, 1, 0. Okay, so we need to raise this by 200 minus x. Well, I'm sorry, here we need to put a 200 plus x too. And then the minus x, 200 minus x, 200 minus x. Okay, so here's the equals, and now you go to your calculator. So on one side, you have 1,000 multiplied by 200 plus x, or minus x, I guess, is the first one. And you add 1,000 multiplied by 200 plus x. Okay, so I get 400,000. Okay, now on the other side, you got a factor of 15 multiplied by 200 plus x, also multiplied by 200 minus x. And I have negative 15x to the second power plus 600,000. Now you get your x squared by itself. You don't need to factor it. Here's where the x squared's at. This is the number that we have to get rid of. So I minus 600,000. That's going to be negative 200,000 equals negative 15x to the second. Okay, then I divide by the negative 15. We get a decimal here. Okay, I'm just going to write 13,333. And then I find the square root of that. Okay. $115. Now they're probably not going to fly an airplane if the wind speed's 115 miles per hour, but